All right. Hello, welcome to this new episode of the Hessian Scrum. This is a special one featuring legendary singer Michael DiSalvo from none other than Canada's finest, Cryptopsy, as well as Arkurion and Infestation. Hello, Mike. How are you today?
It's happening. Thanks for having me. Very well. Thanks, Nick.
So let's start with your latest release. You did vocals on the new Arkurion, which features, a sort of who's who on guest vocals. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Absolutely. With the Arkurion project, one of the things that Tommy, Rob, and Ollie, myself, what we had walked into this with the impressions of doing something that was really an album for us. I mean, that's the best way to say it. It was something that we just wanted to put a series of songs together and form a record, not just a record of songs, but a complete record. And part of that process actually was having some guest vocalists come in to add the specific coloring that we were looking for to tell the story of the record, to be honest with you. So when we had guys like Lord Worm come in and Luke come in and Austin from CCV and Jean-Marie Leblanc as well to come in. These were people that, and Sylvia as well, sorry, and my wife, Genevieve. So the way it was designed was something that had these people specifically in mind as the songs were being created. And it wasn't sort of a last minute, hey, it would be great to get these guys in. It was, as the songs were formulated, these ideas were coming in place to like I said, to help tell the story. And that's how that worked out. And it was, I think for everyone on board, for us, it was an obvious, these were the people we selected that we wanted to be part of it. And I think for them for everyone on their behalf, they all hopped on it immediately, which was humbling, of course,
So it wasn't, let's try to get some people, whoever's the most famous we can get from our friends list or whatever. And it all came together naturally.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, I never, to be honest with you, I never look at it like that. Like, oh, can we get someone to try to sell the record? Or it's never been like that. These are people who are friends of ours. So it's not a stretch to have these people be a part of a project like this. We didn't have to reach out and like, oh, hopefully these people will. We're friends with them. So they already had the voices that were going to tell the story for us. So it was just a matter of them being able to fit it in, and it fit like a glove, to be honest with you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this was probably like the most melodic thing that you've ever done, ever.
I would agree with that.
Was that a challenge? Was that, going from kind of, very typical death metal or the kind of over the top spastic death metal into this?
No, I don't think so. Just with the pedigree of the project outside of me, just the other guys. These are brilliant musicians. These are guys who have been around the block. They've worked together. That was a huge thing too. These guys had already been on tour together, so they knew each other very well. Of course, so did I. I mean, I got to know Tommy and Ollie through this project, but Rob I've been friends with for years, and these are three very close friends now of mine. For me, I already knew what they were doing from previous recordings. So I knew that there was going to be an element of, melodic sort of approach to some death metal too. There was death metal involved in it, but it's also progressive too. We didn't want to brand this album as, a melodic death metal album or this type of thing. We just kind of wanted it to be an album that was set aside from everything else. We wanted it to be a record that was, I don't want to say undefined, but we certainly didn't want to be the ones to define it, if that makes sense. And we just wanted the music to speak for itself. So, the challenge, I look at every album as a challenge. Doesn't matter what style it is. It's always the time that you put into it. you know, the formulation of you know, the songs and the you know, setting up, you know, writing the lyrics down to putting the lyrics in place and stuff like this. So, you know, there's a giant process that's part of that. And you know, the end result was something that we were extremely happy with. And that melodious aspect to it was something that I wouldn't say was discussed in advance. It just kind of happened that way, you know?
Yeah, you know, it's a surprise considering, you know, I think at least 2 of the other 3 guys were in New Access at one point or another. So
all three of them were.
Oh.
Ollie not on record, but Ollie toured with them.
Oh, okay.
Or is he? Maybe he's on record. He might be on record. Let me take that back. But no, but all 3 of them toured together on I forget which album. The Thin Line. I think that was the album that they recorded on. That they toured on together.
Yeah, one of the later stuff they did. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
All right. So, is Arkurion going to continue? Are you going to make it into a kind of fully developed live project, or is this really a one-off?
You know, we went into it with an approach of let's write an album. So I would say that has been and still remains the same story for us. There's been no discussion of doing shows. We have had offers. Excuse me. The offers that came to us were great offers, but it wasn't enough to put it all together. There's a lot that goes into doing that. It doesn't matter about the amount of time that we were playing. We at the time when we recorded the record, we were jamming, let's say, twice a week, right? But we hammered those songs. Like when we recorded that album, we were in the pocket. We were ready for that record. And that's a different ballgame from record transition to live show. Now you've got to come back around because there was a large period of time when once the record was complete, once we had recorded the record, which we recorded live, we hadn't played, and we still haven't played, actually. In fact, that was the time that we recorded that album was the last time that we actually got together to play. So now there's a whole other situation that takes place when you've got live shows that or expectations for live shows, which we never went in with any sort of impression that we were going to do any live stuff. But of course, when offers come, you listen to them and you see, and if it doesn't make sense, does it make sense, you know, financially for us to get together and get dialed in again? You know, it's just because we know the songs doesn't mean you're going to walk right in and stop playing them, right? At least, you know, not for us. And yeah, I think all 4 of us like to be prepared for a show. So no live shows, no touring. I don't think any of that will ever happen. Will a record happen again? It's possible. I mean, Tommy's out in BC. Ollie and Rob is still in Montreal. I moved back down to New England. And so this was a project we got together and we played. It wasn't a project that we did online. This is a project that we were in the same room together. And so I don't know that there'll be another record, but I would never say no to another record either, because I enjoyed playing with those guys. I loved every aspect of it. So it's always a possibility.
Yeah, see, I mean, you know, on the first track, Leave Them Scars, right? Now, you've got all these different singers, you know, each known for doing something very different vocally. I mean, were you kind of in charge of making them all fit together and not, you know, kind of devolving into noise?
Yes, absolutely. As we, you know, that was a song that actually, when that chorus section, if you want to call it, came into play, as soon as we started working on that, I have to say, that was almost an immediate thought, was to have me sing the main part and then have them sing over it. We didn't know at the time specifically. I had the idea of having, you know, at the time, I guess it was me doing, you know, overdubs over it, and I have Leave Them Scars over that piece where I'm singing. And then I think almost instantly it was sort of like, shit, man, you know, we can have Luke on this. We could have, you know, Lord Worm and Jean-Marie. The idea for it was at first was because there's two sections of it, and what we wanted to do was when we first came into it, I wanted to go from the mid range, sorry, from the lowest to the highest, and then on the reverse from the highest to the lowest vocal. You know, where Lord Worm can do those screeches, and both Jean-Marie and Luke are sort of mid range, I guess. It's ended up, that's how it ended up happening. But the initial thought was to do from low to high or higher, and then reverse from the higher to the lower, with Luke always positioned in the middle spot of that. It's kind of always been that. And yeah, it's one of those, you know, sometimes you have to sit with songs and work them out. And this was one of those songs that specific part came very naturally, and it was designed as so, really from the get-go for that particular spot.
Yeah, I mean, it's very impressive because, you know, in other styles of music, they seem to love, you know, having guest vocalists, and in metal, it's never been something that's really big. You know, a lot of the time, you know, a lot of times it does happen, but bands never advertise it, and it's always small things. Corpse Grinder sang on, you know, Suffocation's Effigy of the Forgotten briefly,
Yeah.
then Frank Mullin with Monstrosity, but it was never something that was like big. Do you think there's a reason why they, you know, you don't see I don't know, like, you know, the rap kind of featuring in metal?
I'll venture to say two things with that, actually. The first part of it, I think, at least from back in the day, and perhaps even, you know, to today's standards, I think what happens, or at least what had happened, was you had vocalists who were in the same studio at the time. So they just say, hey man, like, and it happened with me too. And it's happened before, where bands in the studio, they're like, oh man, could you come in and do this part? Sing this one word, you know, it's like, it's on the moment, which is cool. And, you know, I love spontaneity in music. You know, an idea comes and boom, let's do it. Like, try it out. And you know, so I'm a huge supporter of that. Many times we've, you know, something on the moment. I've had shit where it was exact up until a point in the studio, and then you change it on the moment. You're like, fuck, how about this idea? And then you change it completely. So I love that aspect of it. I think that was a big part of, you know, back in the day, especially like in the Tampa Bay death metal scene. You know, when you had guys coming in, you know, doing other parts from, you know, you had guys from John Toddy coming in, and Glenn Benton coming in to do spots in each album. You know, Napalm Death and stuff like this. It must have been down. They probably recorded down in Morrisound, I think. I don't totally recall. But then they had John Toddy and Glenn Benton. So I'm wondering if that was a big part of it. You know, for a lot of these bands, is someone in the area, you're there in the studio or you're close by, sure, come on in and do it. And this is the part. I think the other side of it is, for some stupid reason with metal, I don't know that this is certainly not the case with every band, but I think there's an ego thing that goes on with metal bands in particular. Sometimes there's like there has been, anyways, for sure, there has been competition in the scene for which band can try and get out of that scene. So there isn't a lot of there isn't always, I don't want to say there isn't a lot of, but there isn't always a camaraderie that should be between bands, because you've got that with fans. The fans are all the camaraderie, everyone's tight. And in some instances, you know, you do have those bands for sure. That's not to knock on the bands to say that they never do it, but there is definitely an ego thing that I've seen throughout the years, that there are bands that don't necessarily want to align or unite with other bands. And I can only equate it to an ego thing. You know, maybe I'm wrong on it. I don't know, but that's just my observation over the years with some bands. So maybe that plays into it.
All right, you know, let's go back to 1992, Infestation. So this is where you got your start. So, you know, this is 1992. Death metal vocals aren't really a thing. You know, what went into your head? Why did you start screaming?
Well, actually, it's my second band. There was another project before this that we hadn't done much with. It was a project called Skeletal Onslaught, and that's actually where I cut my teeth. And I'll go back to that project before talking about Infestation, just to say in terms of how it kind of came about. I had one of my friends. He was a neighbor, Chris Grigg, actually, one of the guys, the founding members of Skeletal Onslaught, and he got a Gibson Epiphone, I think is what he had. He got it for Christmas or for his birthday or something. Started learning how to play guitar. I didn't know, we were listening to music, of course. We were, we're all huge music fans and stuff, but I had never sang into a microphone or anything like that. And, in fact, I was a pretty shy guy, and, he started showing me riffs and stuff like this. And I was like, he had like a reporter's mic. If you ever seen those, like, slim little microphones. so it was like, why don't you, we had a friend that was just starting to play some drums. And I remember setting up like outside his house. The neighbors must have loved that shit. We would sit outside on the deck, set up the stuff, and just start playing. And we wrote a song on the spot. And if I remember correctly, the song was called Mass Murderer. It was like, for sure, probably the worst lyrics ever written by me. And, and the song definitely was a load, but it was a starting point, and I have to say, I'm pretty proud of that moment, just because that's what sort of got me going. I think I sang through a PV amp, a tiny little, a rocker PV amp there, and I think I sang through that, and it was just like, you when it's like dawn on a new day, and it just, I don't know, man, it was exciting to me. And it was something I said, well, shit, I don't have to learn how to play guitar. I can scream into the microphone. How hard is that? Of course, there's obviously there's techniques and there's plenty more that falls into that play. But at the moment, you're just like, fuck, I can hang with these guys and do this, And so that's actually where it started. And then it evolved into playing with, certain couple drummers from the area. And finally, we found a couple guys, like-minded guys, and we solidified it. We played shows. We played shows with some big acts. Played with Morbid Angel. Played with Dead Horse. We got on a spot with Dead Horse, and we were in a pretty good position for a to be as in a learning process like we were, to be able to play in good sized clubs. There was the Channel in Boston, which was it's a famed place down by the waterfront. It's long since been torn down, but this was absolutely the place. All the bands came through there. Every band you could fucking think of came through there. And to play at that place as a young kid, learning to do what I do, and what those guys do, to have those chances to play with those bands was absolutely amazing. And that's really where the starting point happened. And that band ended up dissolving, and then of course we started with one of the guys actually that had joined up with Skeletal Onslaught, Matt Raymond, and actually Mark Brophy too, bass player for Infestation. We're also playing in Skeletal Onslaught, and it was a like I said, it dissolved. Those guys started playing together, and they called me up and said, look, we want you to come in and start singing. And that's really how Infestation started. They had already been in place. They were playing with Mike Hubbard on drums, Eric Barabee rhythm guitar. He was already in the mix, and they were looking for a singer. And I came down, and the rest is history. We put out 2 demos, and then recently re-released those demos on Redefining Darkness Records and Raw Skulls Records and Intuit Records. Put them out on CD and put them out on cassettes. Real proud of that. I put out new shirts. You see that shit? It's a huge moment in my career. To I think at this point with Infestation is really where it became official, really official. Where I was like, okay, I personally want to make a go at this, and that fire was always there, but I think this is the point when the songs started coming together and the lyrics were a little, they weren't as fucking cheesy as the shit I was writing before. And, I started to really look into myself, and, a lot of introspection, and I'm very proud of it.
All right. I just looked it up. So you did play with Morbid Angel when you were very young in 1991.
Correct.
So now I want to say, you're a young kid at this point, 1991. So your style of singing isn't defined. There aren't any videos. To anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's like, is this kid mentally ill or something? That's what people would say. So you're doing this thing that's kind of shameful, away from polite society.
Correct.
And then but at the same time, you're opening for Morbid Angel. I mean, how did you know that you really wanted to, to be a serious death metal singer? Like, your evolution over the years was pretty impressive.
Well, thank you for that. It's funny. It really, honestly, when we first talked about we were going to do this, and you mentioned you were going to throw some tough questions my way.
Yeah.
And one of the things that had popped into it popped into my head was the fact that, and you hit on it, is that when we started doing this shit, we were considered pieces of shit from all of humanity. We were considered pieces of shit. I remember going through like high school and guys coming up to me and being like, "Oh, you're a good guy, but what the fuck are you doing with this shit?" We were called the maggots. Literally, we were called the maggots. The jocks would call us the maggots. We called them the jocks. It was this kind of thing. And there was, quite honestly, very few of us. We just kind of banded together, and we were definitely. I don't believe for a second we were different. It's just that we had a different taste in music, and most of it was rooted in fucking rock and roll, 70s classic rock. That's where it started from. And we were still considered maggots. And then of course it evolved into Slayer, Wasp, Metallica, Black Sabbath, things like this, and then into Venom and, Bathory and things like this, where it just sort of, just became more and more and more and more and more. While these other fucking idiots were listening to fucking whatever bullshit they were listening to. And then all of a sudden, fast forward to fucking 10, 15, 20 years later, and now they're all fucking metal fans now, They're all into Metallica. Oh, Metallica, Pantera, Slipknot, they're all into those bands. Nothing against any of those bands. Like I like them all, I like all three of those bands. So, but the point is that when we started, we were pieces of shit, and so for us, I think, I've always been a nonconformist kind of guy. I am a guy who thinks for myself, and I am not a guy that's going to fall into, sort of quotes or a bucket of I got to be this or I got to be that. It's never been that way for me, and so I don't think that the progression into singing was anything that was anything but natural. It was just a natural progression because I was listening to that kind of music. I loved the ideas, the aspirations of becoming, how can you not? You look at bands like Motley Crue, and you look at all the that's like a lifestyle that I don't care who you are. That is a lifestyle that is endearing, no matter what. It's from back in the day. Like, how can you not? As a kid, if you're into music, how do you not look at that and be like, "Fuck, man, I want a part of that," And not to say that it had anything to do with anything but the music, because it really was about the music. But you always have that aspiration of being, could I play stadiums? Can I play these fucking giant festivals? Let's start small and we play some of these clubs, and things like that. Once every step is made through your career, you want more and more and more. Of course, you want that. Your aspirations, at least for me, anyways, my aspirations were, to be at the top of the fucking list. I did want that, I can't say I don't want that now. It's impossible now. I don't think it's ever gonna, my window of time was there, but I can't say that there is, no matter what, the music is the core of it. And then everything else, all those other allures that are part of that, they're all there. If you're in the game, if you're really there and you want it, then you have to set your goals high, and you have to be ambitious, and you gotta want it. And if you want it, you're gonna have success in it.
Because especially you are in a field where it's not like today where you have 10 million books, how to do this kind of growl, how to do this, and then you even see people doing these kind of vocals on TV or on the radio now, and everything's become so compartmentalized. Everyone sounds the same nowadays. Okay,
a lot of it.
Yeah. How did you decide on what your kind of style was going to be, or was it something that came naturally and that you had to work on it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I do recall when I first started, it was just screaming into the microphone. So, there was obvious influences for me from the get-go, John Tardy and Max Cavalera, David Vincent, these guys I would say were catalysts for what I was striving for vocally, and those are three defining voices in metal, and I absolutely I do recall saying to myself, like, I don't want to be, at that point, there was a lot of bands. There still was a lot of bands, and a lot of records were starting to creep in. So, and I think at that time, like, just to hit on what you were saying from before, is that I think back in the day, there was, when people were starting, because it was brand new, there was a defining voice that was involved. You heard the voice, you knew the band, and I don't know that that's necessarily the same today. Like you said, and it's, again, it's not a knock on anyone or any style or anything, but there were times when I hear a voice and I'm like, I don't know what band that is, and then I hear the band, I'm like, oh shit, I know that band, it's like, that's terrible, for me. I always wanted to make sure that there was a voice that was separate, not separate, but that was wrong word. I always wanted to have a voice that was the voice of the band, so when you hear that voice, the band. And whether that was a conscious decision on how I sang, I don't know, but it was definitely something that I did not want to do, is to sound like someone else. I didn't want to sound like John Toddy. I didn't want to sound like, whoever it was. I love those voices. Those guys were, like I said, were a huge part of me wanting to sing, or to sing in that style. But I did not want to sound like them ever. I wanted to be my own voice. So it does start from there, and then you do start with the screaming into the microphone, and then I never had lessons for singing. You start to realize you're singing from here. You're singing from here, you're in trouble. If you're singing, you move it from your throat to your diaphragm, and the game changes. And once I started to realize, okay, after every time I'm singing, my voice is blown out. Okay, there's got to be a little bit more to this, And then I started to just figure it out. It really comes from the diaphragm. Everything's, you have to have that oomph there. It can't be, if it's there, it's going to be gone probably pretty soon. I can't imagine. At least for me, it fucking ruined my throat early on. So I think I quickly started to adapt to being able to sing on a regular basis. And it's not to say you don't lose your voice. I mean, I haven't sang it's been a while since I've sang. Next time I go in and sing, or if I sing to record, I got some stuff I have to record. For sure, I'm going to have a fucking sore throat, But and I'm still singing from here, but it's not predominantly here, and it's not, it's you have to work through those kind of techniques. It's funny because I had one of my friends, one of my good friends, he's actually a good singer, but he's never done anything really, and he had it was like a 8 cassette series on how to sing and shit. I remember listening to that back in the day, and the guy's like, all right, you have to say, he's basically showing you how to enunciate stuff. And I don't know that I took anything from it specifically, but there is definitely some things that I learned from it that started putting me onto that, like, okay, if you sing from the diaphragm and things like that. But you think back on it, you're like, it was more like cock rocks. I had to learn how to sing cock rock. It's basically what it was, how to sing Poison, or how to sing, I don't throw Rat or, Skid Row or any of those guys, Motley Crue, into that specifically, because I actually like those bands. But it was still more of a, sort of a cock rock approach to kind of get your voice to be able to project your voice a little bit better. So I think somehow, because I did listen to a few of them, I was like, this is bullshit. But I actually think I actually learned something from it. A little bit to work with the diaphragm and to find your voice from here and not just from there.
Yeah, let's go towards Cryptopsy. So your first album with them, Whisper Supremacy. Now here, this is where I always thought that you were really at the height of your powers. Both as a vocalist, lyricist. This is where we really get to see who Mike DiSalvo is. And one thing we can really hear on that album compared to a lot of singers, and something that's completely gone in metal today, we can hear your diaphragm. whenever I hear that record, I just literally hear you pushing out every syllable. You know, where did that approach come from? You know, you weren't just going lazily. You know, you're literally going. You know, the walls were shaking. You know.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate that. You know, coming from a band, Infestation, you know, for the style that it was, you know, it's more of a doomy death metal style. So for that style, what I was doing at that point was more more in tune with what was going on with that particular band. And I think when I moved up to Montreal, and Lord Worm had left the band at that point, he had said you should go in and try out for Cryptopsy, you know. And of course I was already familiar with their records, and I already knew the guys anyways, so it wasn't a stretch for me to walk in there in the room. I was already familiar with most of them anyways. You know, I was friends with Flo already, and I was becoming friends with John and Eric, and you know, it just, and Lord Worm, of course, obviously I was, you know, I'm still good friends with them. So, you know, for me to walk into that room was less intimidating, I'd say, but the music is very intimidating. You know, the style is very intimidating. It's a frantic style of music that, you know, I hadn't done before. But I also felt that that my vocal style, what I was doing in Infestation, was probably not gonna cut it as well. You know, you're not gonna, because there's more of a lag on the vocals with that. You can really accentuate and hang on to shit, and whereas Cryptopsy is more bang 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 bang. So if I'm doing that style with it, I just didn't feel it was going to be, you know, something that was going to work as effectively. So I mean, it's still my voice, and you know, I went in there and I still, you know, I wanted to pound out. I just, you know, those songs. I want to come back to the same thing. I don't want to. Lord Worm as a, you hear a Cryptopsy album. If you're into this kind of music, you know Lord Worm's voice. You know, there's an identity there. I certainly didn't want to come in and try to sound and like him. You know, not that I could, but I certainly didn't want to take that approach. But I also didn't want to take the approach of the Infestation stuff too. I recognized there was going to be a difference there. And I tried to work within those parameters, you know, to try to come up with, you know, a voice that matched with the style. And, you know, it's certainly not a contrived approach. It's me, you know, but it's definitely something that I went in and said, you know, I don't think I can do the same thing here. I think I need to put some fucking real balls into this to make these songs come alive, you know, with the vocal aspect of it. And that was my intention from the start, was to get in there and put an album out that you know, musically, sonically, vocally, lyrically, knocked fucking people's heads off. And that was the aim, that was the goal. And you know, we went full strength on that.
Right, because you know, I think, you know, Whisper Supremacy is probably the kind of first really over the top janky death metal album. You know, well, you know, now there are a million albums with literal, you know, riffs taken from that note for note, but you know, your vocal kind of style was you know, is an archetype for a lot of technical death metal. But you know, do you think that the kind of, you know, the rapid fire approach you were doing, was that the only way to kind of, you know, add something to the music?
No, I don't think it was the only way, but I thought it was pertinent to it for sure. You know, I remember thinking, like, you know, it's funny because I don't think we consciously, or I consciously went in and said, I'm going to try and make a difference here, you know, in terms of a vocal style. I just went in with what seemed very natural, and it just seemed the right progression for the band vocally. At that time, because they were, you know, John had come in, and John, you know, not to say anything, you know, again, Steve Tebow, great friend of mine. You know, he's got a certain style of writing. John has a certain style of writing. It's two very different approaches. Both are brilliant, you know. And but I think with Whisper Supremacy, since John had taken over the writing at that point, and Steve had left the band, you know, there were riff structures that were coming in that at the time weren't really something that I remember. I don't recall, like you said, a lot of bands doing that kind of stuff.
Well, I think you guys were the first at the time. I can't think
Yeah,
of anyone else.
Yeah, for sure. I remember saying like, man, this is like, I just recall thinking like, holy fuck, man, this record, when we were recording, we were writing the songs. Of course, we were all in on it. But when we started put that album together, and it was really coming to form, the shape was there. It was just adding the extra details to it and things like this. I personally remember, like, I think we were all like that. We were all looking at each other like, holy fuck, man, this record is gonna kill it. And we were very, very much believers of that. So this, when you've got that kind of positivity on a record and everyone's feeling it and everyone's feeling, wow, this is going to make a difference in the scene, and we really felt it. That's a strong stance to have, but just to go back to the rapid fire type of stuff, it just felt, it wasn't something that I was trying, or there wasn't a heavy like attempt to do it. It just came naturally. It's really, I think, the easiest way to say it.
All right, so during that period live, this is something I always find interesting is when when we see you doing Lord Worm stuff, live, right? I think there's a really good high quality video where two guys are beating each other up with chairs, and then you guys.
Oh, I want to see that.
I think you guys come on and you go straight into Phobophile.
Awesome.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, I not that I condone any violence at shows at all, and I don't, and I've stepped into the audience to stop it, and I really don't condone it. I come from a scene in Boston where violence was a staple, and so it's never something that I have been cool with at all. Never. It's bullshit. You've got people together in a scene, and you want a united front. There, but in the same token, I kind of want to see that.
I mean, from what it looked like, no one really got hurt. They just broke a bunch of chairs on each other, insulted each other, and then you guys came on.
Yeah, that's great.
So,
yeah, as long as and then hopefully they hugged and shook hands and went for a beer after, then I'm totally cool with it.
So
yeah, I mean, I will say, actually, Nick, I will say though, there was a lot of, if it wasn't, it was like friendly violence, I guess, at shows. There was, especially through the States. You play through the States and people are into it and they go crazy and they have a good time, and it's a release, and it's always been a release. The whole scene, the foundation of the scene has been based on release. And so I that's something I absolutely encourage of, you go to a show, especially back in the day, if you went to a Cryptopsy show, we wanted the reciprocation of the fans going crazy, matched with our live performance, which we wanted to be a crazy live performance as well, so we wanted that full interaction that we mostly got, at least in North America. We got it everywhere. Europe, different ball game. Europe was some places they're more into it that other places, like, it's kind of weird. You play like Germany. I was thinking about this before I got on. I was thinking about shows, sort of like standout shows and things like this. But I was thinking about the German shows. I've always looked at Germany as like sort of a mecca for metal. It is a mecca for metal. There's always been a ton of bands, great bands come out of this. Autumn Creator, like there's a ton of bands that I love and respect come out of there. And you see in the old videos, the kids are all, it's more like headbanging, like this kind of thing. I can't say they get into the pit as much, but playing there, I remember like watching like crowds just stand there like this, like not moving their heads. And I'm like, they totally, like, they think this, they're not into this or what? And then at the end of the song, then everyone's like clapping and stuff. So it's a different, I don't know, it's different culture, different scenes, different whatever. You can't lump them all into one category. But we did see some of those shows that were, at first we're like, man, I don't know if they're scrutinizing us. Like LA, you play LA, there's a bunch of musicians standing there and they're like scrutinizing you. And then you got some kids that are like pockets of kids that are having fun. The rest of them are like, yeah, I don't know, I could get up there and do that, but whatever, it's that kind of, it's LA, So, and we saw that in Germany as well. It's one specific place, but then again, they were all clapping and all into it too. So who's to say?
Yeah. So what I wanted to ask you initially, I think we kind of got sidetracked, is, how do you tackle, Lord Worm songs? Because, Lord Worm is Lord Worm. There is never going to be Lord Worm 2 or 3, right?
Agreed.
So, but then you do something like, I think, personally, I really liked what you did, despite the sound quality during that time period not being great. You're definitely doing the high screams, like not the same way he's doing it, but you're interpreting his vocalist styles in your own manner. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, you follow in Lord Worm's footsteps, and you better be on your game. This like you said, this is a legend. He's a legend in the scene, no doubt about it. There are people who may try to emulate what he's done, but nobody will do what he's done, especially his writing. Lyrically, unfucking believable. Guy is an impeccable writer. And if you want to try and follow suit with that, which I had, I can't say that I did try to write some songs that were in line with him, but it was never something that I wanted to try to cover what he had done, because he's his own person, and he is the identity. He was the identity of early Cryptopsy, and still is the identity of Cryptopsy. No matter what myself and Matt has done, and that's just the way it is, and Martin as well in my thing. We have taken our own interpretations of what he had as a bass. So no matter what, I'm the second guy, Martin's the third guy, Matt's the fourth guy, and there's nothing wrong with that. All of us have brought something to the table. But for me to go in again, I never wanted to do what he had done. I wanted to come in and do what I do. So there was never a conscious decision on trying to copy what he had put out already. Sure, there's some screaming, like you said. There's some sections that I try to keep in line with it, but I never wanted to approach the way he sang. I never wanted to approach in the way I sing. It's just, first of all, it would be a fakery, a forgery, and secondly, it's just not me, So I went in and I tried to fit some of those long sentences into like a condensed little time capsule of these riffs, as best as I could. And I did it on, recording, because we had 2 songs on Whisper Supremacy that were his. And then live, of course, we had an array of songs that we would do, mostly from None So Vile. But we did a few songs from Blasphemy. We used to do Born Headless. That was probably I think that was the biggest song we used to do. That, and maybe Serial Messiah we used to do a few times as well. So I would always push for that, because I always like the breakdown in the song. So yeah, let's do that song. But that was early on, and then we kind of pulled away from a lot of the songs on Blasphemy. Oh, Defenestration. Yeah, we used to do that. That was probably the song that we did the most, was Defenestration. And but I think that was really the only song that was carried over, was that one. Everything else was a lot of None So Vile. We used to do 3, sometimes 4 songs from that. Early on we would sing quite a few songs from that record. And then it just, as the band progresses, you pull away from it, and then those songs, it's only 1 or 2 songs that I have to put a focus on, my interpretation of his songs.
Yeah. I mean, let's talk about your lyrics, because some of your lyrics definitely do have a kind of weird kind of almost kind of dreamlike Lord Worm vibe. But I think the main difference is that everything you do is so heartfelt, in terms of lyrics. There's a lot of passion, a lot of emotion, a lot of heart. Yeah,
I would agree with that. When I'm writing, even if it's not in the first person, written in the first person, you could pretty much bank on it's something that's related to an experience that I've gone through, or or what I'm feeling on the moment, or whatever the case may be. And I think that's across the board with everything that I've written. I take great pride in putting out lyrics that, above all, mean something to me. And if it spreads to people beyond that, wonderful. That's a bonus. Is really what it is. I write, and I mean this in the most unegotistical way. I write to please me, and if somebody draws inspiration from that, or somebody draws, life. I've had so many people come up to me with all kinds of things about lyrics and that I had written, and people have their own interpretations of it. And, I've said this before, that I love that aspect of it, is that everyone, no matter what you're writing, everyone's going to have their own interpretation of it. And that's special about music. It's never going to be word for word their experience of what my experience is. It's going to be word for word their own experience. And that's a beautiful thing. If people actually delve into lyrics, which, let's face it, not a lot of people do. If they find some inspiration in that, man, that's awesome. It's beyond humbling.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so a lot of your lyrics tend to have, some really cool, eloquent wordplay, and then you mix it up with some crude language here and there.
Yeah. It's funny. I've had some friends be like, "Wow, why would you write that?" And so like all this other, this other stuff around, and then you add this type of thing in there, like, and that's okay. That's somebody else's impressions for it. They don't want to write like that. That's okay. That's just how I write. I am at heart a crude fucking guy. For sure. Anyone who spends any time with me will know that I love crude jokes. I'm a guy that is not offended by people. I'm certainly not out to offend people, but I am outspoken, and and sometimes some of that can creep into the lyrics, and it's not a conscious decision that I'm doing that. It's just how the words flow out on paper. It comes from my mind to paper, and does it fit? How do I make it fit into what I'm trying to achieve in the song? And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then I remove shit. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, what are some of literary, movie influences, radio, what influences your writing? Because I think your writing style is definitely pretty unique in metal. No one's quite doing what you're doing.
That's awesome. I'm really happy to hear that you feel that way. I'm a huge H.P. Lovecraft fan. Giant H.P. Lovecraft fan. That guy, I think, is probably tops in terms of wordsmanship, and writing style is turn of the century, but nobody writes like that guy, and nobody will. I just don't see it. He's unbelievable. I would say that, and musically, another guy, Cormac McCarthy, huge fan of Cormac McCarthy. I'm a big reader. So, these guys, I think express situations unbelievably well, more than most people do. They just somehow adapt whatever the situation is, and turn a horrific situation into this poignant, beautifully written, piece. I love the way they write. Lyrically, somebody like Roger Waters has been a major influence. I just think that guy's maybe the best lyricist of them all. He's someone that I certainly look up to in terms of lyricism. In fact, most of aside from like Woodworm, and this is not a dog on anybody and anybody's lyrics. I don't think there's a guy in metal that I would look at that I feel akin to, or I don't know what the right word is, that I take any inspiration from, I guess it would be it. Lyrically for metal, there's a few bands that somebody like Steve Von Till from Neurosis, love his writing, incredible. That's probably the it's probably a guy that I would say is the one guy that I truly look at his lyrics and I'm like, wow, that speaks to me. You know, guys like, you know, even outside of that, and I'm not a country guy at all. I fucking hate country music. I'll set the record straight. But there are a few guys out there that make a difference, and guys like Townes Van Zandt. That guy's a brilliant writer. His fucking lyrics are unbelievable, in my opinion. Just, it's dark. It's you know, you can literally taste his life just from his words. And that's you know, I would say that, you know, those are, you know, a wide variety of inspirations, but definitely people I key in on for sure.
Right, because you know there's some of your lyrics that really resonated with me personally. So you know, it's this little paragraph, you know, hourglass and mournful stillness, a tribute to sorrow's passing, as time drips in endless melancholy and gruesome recollections. Could you tell us more about that line? That's a fantastic. I find it gorgeous.
That just gave me chills. Actually, it's pretty sad, but yeah. That's awesome, man. You know, and that song in particular, Depths You've Fallen. I have when I wrote that song, I was I don't want to say a depression, but definitely that is a perfect example of what I had mentioned before about introspection. That song was a deep introspection song of just rights and wrongs in life, things that you've done in life where you're not happy and pleased with how you handle situations, you know, and what you do to get your head back in the right place to make amends for things that you know, and that could be anything. It could be just telling someone you're a fucking piece of shit, down to physically hurting somebody, you know, down to whatever it was. You know, I don't think there was a specific situation that I looked at that particular time. I at least I don't recall right now, but I can definitely say it was one of those songs where I was I certainly wasn't feeling good about a handful of decisions that I had made in my life, and the way I handled them. And sometimes the best way to resolve those things, at least in your own mind, is to get them out on paper. And that was one of those songs that just came together very easily. It really was, spill it out on paper, and it was like you drop a drink on a piece of paper, and oh, there's some words there. It was kind of like that.
Yeah, you know, I just love that imagery, you know, of just kind of being, you know, angry, sad, and being caught in kind of in a loop, in a memory that just plays again and again. And you know, it's incredible that you managed to make something so honest, so real, so, you know, revealing in such crazy fucking music, you know.
Thank you, appreciate that.
So you know, let's go on to the next release. Was it And Then You'll Beg? Some, you know, I always confuse Once Was Not and Then You'll Beg, and in my head it becomes And Once You'll Beg for some reason. I know, sorry.
I've heard that before.
You know, I don't know why. So you know, this one, I think you kind of stayed in the same kind of lane, but you're giving more opportunity to shine because the music wasn't as intense. There was a lot more groove to it.
Yeah, there was. You know, and I again, I don't think it was a conscious decision. For sure, we did not say let's have more groove on this record. It was definitely not something that was discussed. I think it was just the progression of the band at the time, and you know, I think at that time, you know, those songs, I love those songs on that album. We were working 3, sometimes 4 nights a week to craft those songs and to get them as tight as possible. That's you know, that's one thing I have to say about Cryptopsy is when we, you know, prepared for songwriting, prepared for the studio, prepared for live, we got it to a point where it was, you could almost be, all the sound was out and we still knew where we were, you know, like the power could be out and we could still be playing with no power and know exactly where we were. We were that in the pocket at that point, you know, and for that record, we went in with the same the same approach as we did with Whisper Supremacy, was to, come in, write some songs that we're happy with. And I would say there was a bit more, I do remember a bit more pressure, if you will. Not that it wasn't like a fucking smothering blanket or anything, but there was some pressure after coming out with Whisper Supremacy, and how well that record did for us. We wanted to come in, and you always have the impression, you always want to top an album. You always want to come in and top an album. So I think we certainly wanted to come in and come up with a record that was going to stand the test of time. That's always been, at least when I was in the band, that was the approach. We wanted to come in and put out albums that made a difference and meant something to someone, meant something to the scene. And that was no different. We did spend a lot of time writing that. That album I think it took a bit more time for us to write that, if I recall. It took us a bit more time to put that together. The songs, there's a lot of variation to those songs. More so than Whisper Supremacy. I think there was plenty of variation on that album too, but this one, there was a lot of experimentation. I think we tried a lot more different things. We opened the valve a bit more with that album.
Yeah. So how did you adapt, to the kind of, because you have those frantic parts, you've got the slow parts, the chugging parts, there was a lot going on there. So, what was your approach compared to Whisper Supremacy?
Not much different. I think it was really the same approach. Yeah, basically the songs were written. I was always there. The whole band was there when we were writing songs. So, there's a difference with that too. When you've got everyone, it's not some guy sitting in his, not John sitting in his house writing the parts. Of course, he, obviously he did that too. Comes in with some riffs, but everyone put their 2 cents in, which I don't think is always the case. At that particular time with the band, we were all in on it, and what was being put together. I would come up with some lyrical ideas. Sometimes as they're writing, I'd have my notebook and just writing some stuff. A lot of stuff I didn't use, some stuff that clicked. And then as the song progresses, I finalize my parts. I would practice some parts through it, as they were writing. And then usually what would happen is once the song is complete, then I would sit back and listen to the song. We recorded on cassette, and then I would sit back and then just hammer the songs out from that point. Take some parts that I had already written, add some parts. You're always going to add some parts. I don't think I've ever written a song that I didn't add some additional parts because it doesn't fit with, stuff like that. It's always it's an ongoing sort of battle with that. Yeah, I don't think there was a change of approach, at least on my behalf. I don't think I think the whole project, those 2 albums, it was pretty much the same writing process.
Right. I think you're saying that a lot of it is subconscious and you don't really think about it. And then, no matter how hard you plan for it, like you said earlier, things change in the studio.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. There's definitely some stuff that stays. Most of it does, once we're ready, like I said, we were a well-oiled machine. So when we were ready to go in the studio, we were ready. That was it. But, obviously you change or addition, new stuff that you add to it, stuff like that, like new coloring and, different, some slight different wording, different enunciation, stuff like that. You change it as you're listening to it back. You're like, I don't know, maybe I could try it like this, and then you go back and you switch it up a bit. But there's definitely, at least on my behalf, anyways. There's never a situation where I kind of go with the flow of it. I really do. I have I'm lucky enough that I have an ability to. I have like an internal metronome, it's like, I'm able to work some of those frantic parts. I'm able to work some of those parts in and then change it up with something else without much thought. It just comes inherently. I'm lucky in that sense, because I know it's not something that comes easily with everyone. Somehow it clicks with me, and I'm fortunate. It's not something I've trained for or anything. It's just kind of kind of happens. Yeah.
All right. So now for the $1 million question, there's a rumor that's been going on for a long time now that, well, you sang those songs despite not, writing them, but when Lord Worm went into the studio for Non So Vile, people said that he got so drunk he actually forgot to sing any lyrics. Can you tell us the truth about this?
I have not heard that. I have not heard that. I don't. No, I don't know that that's true. I think it's really, honestly, I think it's just his style. He's not a guy that will go in and enunciate. He's basically, his craftsmanship is his writing abilities, and his his crazy over the top vocals. And the two of those together, it's almost as if you don't really, for what he had done, you don't need the enunciation. It just works. He's like a rabid dog out there. Like, honestly, I have not heard that situation before, and I'm good friends with him, so it's not something that it has ever come out that he was wasted in the studio. He can get wasted, but I don't think he was wasted in the studio.
Now the second question: why don't you eat worms on stage?
Because it's fucking gross. I don't know. Again, that was his deal, and many people have asked me, along, well, you're gonna eat worms, you're gonna do this, and I was like, fuck no, I'm not doing that shit. I didn't eat them when I was out in the audience. I'm not gonna eat them on stage. No, and I'll eat anything, just not earthworms in a fucking goblet.
All right. So, what can we expect from you in the future? What do you have planned? What do you want to get done? What is going to be out?
Okay. So, well, we put the Infestation records out. On CD. I would love to put them out on vinyl at some point. That's certainly a goal. I don't know if that's something that's short term or long term, but I would eventually love to put everything I've done out on vinyl, including other projects that I've done that are basically on my computer and few people know about them. I do want to release them on vinyl, and how I'll look to do some of that. Some of my other earlier projects I'm going to look to do 7 inches for. I do plans to put out an e-commerce store to sell some of this stuff, and some paintings I've done, paintings my wife has done, paintings my kids have done, do prints and do all this kind of stuff. This is an end goal. I want to also put a lyrical book out, which is in the plans now. It's just when it happens. It is definitely going to happen. It's just when it happens. Musically, I need to. We're working on the new CCV Coma Cluster Void record, and we just released a single. A second single is going to be released soon, and then we're going to finish up the record. It's going to be called Absurd Romanticism, and I don't know when it's going to be released. I'm assuming sometime in 2022. But we're currently working on that. I've also got another project called Uncle Stalin and the Communist Joy, and all tongue in cheek, of course. And that's with Pat Hamlin, from a drummer for Gorguts, Matsier, fucking amazing drummer, and Matt Barabee and Alex Hebert. So the four of us are doing that project. We've got 2 songs that are recorded vocally. Once I move, I'm looking to buy a house up in New England here. So once I get that, I'm going to finish off the rest of the songs. They're waiting on me. It's fucking terrible, but they are waiting on me. It's not a position I'm comfortable with, but alas, we're in that position. So we have 6 songs. They need 4 more songs from me. Lyrically, they're kind of done. Like I said, there'll be some changes and shit, but I just got to sit down with them and finish off those songs. So I got those two records coming out. And really, I have a pretty full plate of ideas and things I want to get done, and we'll take it from there.
All right. Well, any final words? I've held up your time for quite a bit.
My pleasure. No, honestly, thank you for having me on. I'm always stoked. It's always a humbling experience. Anyone who wants to chat with me, I'm always down. Yeah, thank you, Nick. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, well, that's it. So thank you very much. Have a good one, and hope everyone got their questions answered.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Bye bye.